Hello, my name is Emma, and I'm bad at explaining things. But today, I'm going to do my best and try to give you my knowledge on how I do most of my artwork, mostly character work. I will be sharing the brushes that I use. Finally, I know a lot of you have been asking how I choose colors, how I shade, and how I take advantage of Procreate's effects and tools. This video is not me trying to tell you what is right or wrong, so any advice I give you should be taken with a grain of salt because I don't always know what I'm doing. However, I still wanted to make this video for the people who are curious or maybe want to explore different art styles. I always find other people's processes really interesting, and I've really only done a tutorial type video one other time a long time ago, so let's see how this goes. I think that's enough explanation, so let's get right into it. This video will mostly be focusing on coloring, shading, and general vibes I try to achieve with my artwork. But briefly, I want to touch on the before process. When I start planning a piece, I usually try to look for a lot of interesting references or things that generally match what I'm going for. I'm going to link my Pinterest below. I've never publicly shared it before, but I do have some stuff on there that I've curated over many years, including all the references I used for this video. I know people sometimes have trouble navigating Pinterest and finding certain things they're looking for, so if I can provide that jumping off point in any way for any of you, that's a win for me. My sketching process has changed slightly digitally and on Procreate. I used to mostly sketch with a smooth line art brush, but now I'm going back to a textured look. I find it's easier to find more subtlety when you use a less dense brush, one with a more noticeable pressure sensitivity. As this video progresses, I will be showing all the brushes I am using at the time, and I will be linking the ones I use below. I don't use a whole lot of custom brushes. I use a lot of default brushes in Procreate, but there are some that I do use all the time, and I will include them. There's so many components to characters like anatomy and composition. Unfortunately, I'm not getting into that too much, but my drive-by advice is to do lots of studies, use websites like Quick Poses for anatomy, and if you like to focus more on your interest, like me, I'd say study a particular actor you like or redraw characters in your favorite animated shows. Yeah! There's so many ways to go about line art. I've been liking more clean line work, but I wasn't always like that. I would heavily rely on the looseness of sketchy line art or just use sketches as line art for a long time because I just could not get the hang of digitally making clean line art. If you're looking to do more clean line work, the stabilization tool in most digital programs is your friend. I pretty much turn it all the way up on Procreate just because I have a shaky hand at some angles, and it just helps me a lot. I used to be a stabilization denier. I thought it was stunting me, so I have changed my ways. Even if you do more loose line work, I still say the stabilization is a nice thing to add because it does add some structure regardless of what style you're going for. This is where you go. Just select it on any brush you're using. I know a lot of you will probably know this, but I'm just putting it there just in case you don't. One thing I do every time after I completely line the drawing is I will go back in with a thicker line weight to outline the entire edge of the line art and also make prominent places I like in the drawing to be thicker. I do this for two reasons. One is because when you fully color and shade a piece, some of the times the line art can fall into the background, and having a good base can help you really see where your drawing is going. And two, because it hides imperfections while also bringing out certain details that need to stand out more. If you you use Procreate, I will say the liquify tool is my best friend. I use it so often, maybe too often. It's just a nice way to get things done in a streamlined manner. It's really good for small adjustments. I often use it on eyes that are a little too far apart. It has a lot of options that are very useful, like expanding or shrinking, which I also abuse heavily. Sometimes the head is just a little too small or a little too big and you need to fix it, but you don't want to redo everything, so it's a nice fallback.
Yeah!
Color is something I don't always have the best grasp on, but I will give you everything I have to give. Generally these days, I tend to go for more saturation. When I was first beginning art, a lot of people online who would give you advice would tell you to avoid very saturated colors, but I think that statement is just a little misguided. For the longest time, I found my art to be dull and muddy, and I used overlays so much to the point that the colors would just change by the time I was finished with it. And I realize now it's because I longed for neon. I longed for color. But I was too scared of being cringe. So I relearned how to color, and there's definitely a balance to it. It's not black and white. Tough grad. For one of my examples, I'm drawing my character Winifred. I'm obsessed with her right now. She's so cute and kind of terrible, but in a very endearing way, and I just love her. But that's besides the point. I have already designed Winifred, so I pretty much just color picked from my previous drawing of her. But as you can see, all of my colors are pretty saturated, and I mostly focus on values to separate each section, like eyes, clothing, hair, etc. And if you don't know what value is, it refers to the lightness or darkness of colors, ranging from black to white. And if you make a new layer, fill it with black, and set the mode to color, you can clearly see what the values of your piece look like and what sticks out and what doesn't. Winifred is not a very good example on how to properly make use of values. I purposefully made her skin color very close to her hair color. I just like that look, I don't know. But to differentiate a little bit between the two, I do add a gradient with a lighter version of her hair. If you're not sure how to get more saturation when you look at a color wheel, generally you want to go around this area. I don't know how color wheels are on all drawing programs, but at least on Procreate, if you go to the right, that is where the most saturation will be. On the left is where you will see white all the way to black. But you don't really want to go all the way to this area. You'll generally want to go somewhere around here. More desaturation is helpful as well, and it can help more saturated colors pop out way more. So there's definitely a balance to it. If you struggle with choosing colors, I recommend looking for complementary colors in your color schemes. It's a good way to have a jumping off point, and this is the way you do this on Procreate. There's also a lot of other different modes. I would also recommend going on Pinterest and looking at color palettes that inspire you and picking and choosing directly from that color palette. Even if it's not what you end up going with, it's a good way to get the ideas flowing. If you have trouble with picking skin tones, there's also skin tone color palettes that you can directly color pick from, and that is also a very good jumping off point in my opinion. Lighter skin tones generally can get away with more desaturation. However, when picking color for darker skin tones, it does get a little more complex because if you're used to drawing in lighter skin tones, generally you can get away with just going yellowish to tan, pretty pale, and it'll work out. But when picking darker skin tones, you want to go much warmer and lean way into those saturated colors, because if you stay in this area, the skin tone will end up looking kind of gray. But if you go over here, it becomes much richer and more lively. For my darker skin tone example, I'm drawing my character Hazel, throwback, my forgotten character. I'm unfortunately not giving you a very wide range of skin tones in this video, but generally what I'm saying here can be methods used for, I'd say, most skin tones. You just gotta flip the context sometimes. And I will get more into this in the next section.
Yeah!
This will be my first fully rendered style. It's my most simple way of finishing a piece, and it's my go-to whenever I'm doing comics or a character sheet. So let's get into it. Now, we're gonna take it back to the saturation. Like I said, desaturated colors are fine, and I would tend to use more desaturated colors for a base layer before I shade or add details, but just a little bit. It's still very saturated, of course. So for the face, I heavily rely on blush to bring out detail and bring life into this girl. When I choose a blush color, this is the best way I've found to do it for pretty much any skin tone. I'll take a more saturated color, usually in this range, and I find that more is better in this case since you can always tone it down later. Making a new layer, I add a small swatch on the skin, and I'll use my smudge tool with a airbrush to blend it out into the skin tone. Once you've done that and you're satisfied with the color, however much or less you want to do, you can color pick that and undo, and you got your blush. Then I will take the eraser tool and start carving out places I like, places like around the nose, on the cheeks, and around the eyeballs. Adding subtle highlights, it's a start and it gives it a little definition. Then I'll take a more purplish color to shade more prominent places on the face, and again I do the same method I did with the blush where I take the darker shade, blend it into the skin tone, color pick it, and use it to my leisure. I like to do shading on one side of the nose usually. It's not always correct lighting wise, but it's okay, it gets the job done. I'll also do under the nose, under the lips, under the chin, and around the eyes to really make it pop. For the eyes, you'll generally want to shade the outside and a bit of the inside of each eyeball. After that's done, I'll take a bluish tone and blend it into the purplish shading we just did to add a kind of catch light, but it's not a catch light in realistic terms. That's what it's supposed to be, but I don't know. I just kind of like the way it looks, honestly. That's optional, you don't have to do that, but I think it does add a little more zhuzh. I'll then add subtle highlights sparingly with a color just a little lighter than the OG skin tone, and you can add this to another layer to lower the opacity later if you find that it's too much. I'll add it to places like the inner eye, the eyelid, the cheeks, lips, and the nose, and I think that really brings the face together. I change up the way I do eyes so much. I feel like I've never had a really good eye style, and I'm so jealous of some people because people draw eyes so beautifully and it makes me just die of envy, I swear to God. But anyway, the eye style I'm doing this video I've pretty much never tried before, but I'll just tell you what I did. I do the eyes with my line art, so in order to color them, I use a clipping mask tool, and this is how you do it. You make a new layer, you hit clipping mask to the said line art, and then there you go. Boom. Boom! 5 big booms. You can color on your line art and you don't have to worry about going out of the lines. Boom! I generally like to darken the sclera at the top. I think it adds a lot of depth to the eyes and make them appear more subtle and not so scary. I had a phase where my eyes were just scary, you know what I'm saying? But hey, if you like big blue orbs, more power to you. Winifred's eyes are Winifred's eyes are brown, and I blended out a couple shades of brown from the black to add a subtle gradient into the lightest color. The lightest colors will generally be at the bottom of sclera, and I will add little bits of highlights as well, just very subtly. I don't like to go too much. I felt the eyes were kind of falling back a bit though, so I added a gray color to the top of the sclera around the lash line and then blended it out at the bottom to make it look kind of reflective. And I think that worked out pretty well. Around the pupil, I'll add the white highlight and I'll add a black rim around the highlight. I think this just adds a little more realism while also being very stylized, and you can't really see it in this piece, of course, because her eyes are pretty dark, but it's there. Moving on, hair can be very tricky. There's a lot of different ways to do hair. There's a lot of different hair textures. So this video video will not cover pretty much anything when it comes to how many different types there are. But here's how I did Winifred's. I darkened the top of the hair with a slightly darker color to her hair color. Generally, you want to focus on connections, and those connections are where you're going to want to shade. So, for example, where her hair clip lies is a good place to add. The hair between her head and her shoulders is a nice place as well, and it adds more depth to the piece overall, as well as the bottom of her hairstyle. After the initial shading, I'll blend it out. I generally try to keep a nice edge at one point of the shading. For example, you can see there's a clear shape here and the rest of the color is kind of blended out here. I'll then add a bluish tone that I love to add and blend it into the darker parts of the shading. And even though it's not correct, like I said, I like the way it looks. I'll add a little highlight at the top of her hair. I get a little iffy on hair highlights sometimes. I used to go a little overboard, so I'm trying to reel back a bit right now. I have been trying this style and I do like it. I think it's pretty nice. I'm going for a more bubble highlight instead of a fully shiny hair look. Lastly, the little bit of clothes I included. Look, the face is the most important to me, so I'm giving you the most important aspect. Clothing is a whole nother ballpark when it comes to rendering, and I didn't go that hard on this illustration at all, but when you're rendering fabric, it's a lot of rounded triangles with the bottom of those triangles blended out. And that is a terrible explanation, but just trust me, bro. In all seriousness, just follow what I do and that'll get you started, because as you can tell, I'm not that confident in clothing, so I don't have all the knowledge in that department. Honestly, if you don't feel like drawing and shading clothes, throw a black turtleneck on your character and call it a day. It's tried and true. Steve Jobify them. It'll save you a lot of heartbreak. To finish off the drawing, I like to merge down all the layers, duplicate the girl, and blur out the duplicate layer just a bit, and then I will take that blurred layer and set the effect to luminosity. I think it gives the drawing a nice smoothed out look that's still subtle. This is optional, but I like to do this when I have pieces that are focused mostly on the face. Moving on to Hazel, generally it's all the same techniques. Same with the blush, the purplish tone. You just want to use darker colors, and I again say more saturation the better. I definitely had a gray skin phase when I first started out drawing darker skinned people, and it's easy to fall into, especially when you have very little experience, but it's okay. Mistakes get made. We're always evolving, baby. Generally, instead of focusing on shading, I'll focus on highlights instead. Looking at references of real people is very helpful in this regard. It'll help you really see where you should be placing these highlights. I place them on the forehead, around the nose area, the inner eye. Using this warm golden tone was a great way to add a lot of warmth to the face. This really makes everything pop, and I really like this look a lot. Skin goals, am I right? For hair, it's clearly very different from the first go about it. I used custom brushes by Vigalia. For this, Hazel has a afro, and of course, you can do this by freehand. However, if you struggle on black hairstyles and you do have the money to purchase these brushes, I really recommend it. It's a great way to jump into these hairstyles and learning the best way to draw them. They're also very clean and work beautifully on Procreate. This is not a sponsor, I just really like these brushes. I use the curl texture and the curl line art outline to make a gradient in her hair. I don't think this is the best way to shade an afro, but this is her canon design, so I try to keep up with that. And I really like how this came out, so I can't complain. See, this is why references are so important, and keeping all of your references together can be pretty crucial to your process. I'd love to share how I keep my thoughts organized with today's sponsor, Milano. Milano is a great tool for organizing your creative projects and is designed specifically to help you plan, brainstorm, and collaborate on your ideas. I used it for this project to gather all of my reference images into one place and categorize them individually with multiple different boards. Milano is very visual, and as a visual person, it helps a lot in getting a full landscape landscape on how a project is going to turn out. I love writing down notes on things to keep in mind and small checklists to make sure I'm keeping on track. This program has helped me start a lot of creative projects and really helps you dip your toes into whatever you're planning. Starting a project is very easy with over 100 built-in templates available. You don't have to feel overwhelmed with making sure everything looks nice visually. I mostly use the ones in the creative section, but they have so many different categories that are very useful for pretty much anything. Adding images is a breeze as you can bank multiple from your own library to add comfortably and to your taste. Customization is pretty freeform. You can draw freely on the boards, change the background colors, and add images from their built-in finder. If you need to keep track of a particular color palette or are trying to feel out a vibe, you can easily add color blocks, and they'll even automatically name whatever color you choose, which I absolutely love. Milano is great for collaborations and is really helpful for working with your team in real time. You just share the link and get to work. Another very handy feature, especially if your team can't meet in person. This program is extremely versatile and I'd recommend it for any creative, hobbyist, or professional. It's a great tool to have on hand. I sure like having it. If you are interested, milanote is available for free with no time limit. You can sign up today with the link in my description below. Thank you, milanote, and let's continue on.
Yeah!
Moving on to another style of shading / rendering I like to do. This one relies more on realism, though it's not very realistic. I usually do this when I'm shading something with a background or when I want something to look a little more interesting or realistic in quotation. With your base and some blush, because you always have blush, I make a new layer. I fill that layer with black, hit clipping mask, and this will fill the entire illustration. I then change the black layer to multiply and lower the opacity a bit. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but I like to carve out my lighting with an eraser, and that's just what I did. I almost always have a reference for stuff like this, and I use this picture, and that was a lot of help with lighting. I'll usually carve out the light source with a brush like this, and then I will blend it out as I go. After I'm pretty happy with how the black layer turned out, I will turn off the clipping mask and add another layer to be the clipping mask for the shading. I hope I'm making sense. I'm so sorry if I'm not. This is to add more depth and blend the shading out into the base color so it's not so harsh and lifeless. And yes, it will probably look a mess at this point, but it will all come back together in the end. For the skin, I will generally add a red tone to the edges of the places I shaded, as well as adding in some of that blue tone that I talked about before. And I will usually use a airbrushing tool. It's just easier and it will subtly get the job done. If your shading looks a little too heavy, you can also take a large airbrush to slightly erase some of the places you find a little too much. My lighting may not be the most correct in all cases, but I've learned over time that if you successfully convey what you're going for, it doesn't always have to be 100% completely right, in my opinion. I would always worry if my techniques were completely correct all the time, and if my light source was right. This might not be the best advice, but if it looks good to you, I say let it be. For the hair, it's pretty much the same thing. Winnie's hair is again very similar to her skin tone, so I used a reddish tone to soften out the edges of the shading. For highlights, I only added some here very subtly because I feel like this style, at least in my case, reads better with more emphasis on shading rather than highlights. I just like things to look more matte in this particular shading style, I guess. I added back the same sclera as I did before and just darkened them a bit because they would have stood out way too much. So the eye process is the same for this as well. At this point, my colors were looking a little dull, so I kicked in my other best friend that I use a lot, and that is Procreate's color balance tool. If your piece feels lacking in color, it's a great way to improve it, especially when you're very far down the line and feel that all hope is lost. It's saved me a couple times, that's for sure. I'll just play around with the features until I get something I like, and once I've landed on that, I'll move on to adding some finalizing effects. I've really been into adding this blur effect to my drawings, and the way you do this is by combining the whole illustration down with the background into one layer. Next, you want to duplicate the layer and blur the duplicate. You don't want to do too much, but just enough. I'd say around this range. I'll then take a airbrush eraser on the blurred layer and carve away the places I want to highlight. You can see how this adds a little bit of realism, a little bit of visual interest. I really like that. I have gone overboard with this before, but it's hard not to. It's so fun. Finishing it off, I'll add a chromatic aberration, just a little bit, to add more softness and a little more interest to the piece. And there you have it. There is the dynamic Winifred. Next, we'll do Hazel. Now this one didn't turn out as well as I hoped it would, but I'm still going to share what I did. The process is almost entirely similar. Again, same shading style, same light source, same techniques all around, but again, I focus much more on highlights than I did the shadows. I do think I could have done this much better, but I think it conveys what I was trying to go for, mostly. And I used the same lighting reference as well. I shaded her hair with the same brush by Regalia again, and I used the same technique with the color balance feature to brighten it up when it was feeling a little dull. I know I don't have much to talk about because I went over it all, but it's another example if that helps anyone. I think Hazel is beautiful and I need to draw her more. Have you got all of that? I hope so. There's a quiz at the end of the week, so be ready.
Yeah!
Let's move on to the next segment. This section will be shorter. I mostly just want to talk about stylization and different vibes you can do. The possibilities are endless with the last method I showed you. For this Winifred illustration, I went for an underwater look. I used this reference and I could not for the life of me find who this artist was. I reverse image searched from Pinterest. This is the person who seems to be posting all of these on Pinterest. I'm not sure if this is the artist, but if you know, please comment down below and I will try to credit them. When you're doing different environments with such intense lighting differences, you have to account for that character's color scheme and it will likely be very different. For the base, I changed Winifred to be completely blue. You can eyeball this, as it can always be changed later, but I mostly just focused on the values between the blue. The sphere reference was very helpful and it was nice to pick the colors from. I basically copied it from my reference just to help me, so kudos to this artist. For the light source, I used this reference, and after I was finished with the shading, I got to use one of my favorite Procreate default brushes, which was the water brush. I never get to use it, and I was really happy. The next one I did was supposed to be sun lighting, blue sky outdoor lighting. This one didn't come out as well, but I think it does convey what I was going for, so I filled a layer and used the clipping mask again for the shading, but instead of using black, I used the direct background color. If you're shading a character and they have a background, a good rule of thumb is to color pick one color from that said background. It will help the character look like it's supposed to belong in that environment much better. I was gonna do a lot more, but I feel you get the gist at this point. I hope if you can't follow along with what I'm saying, just follow along with what I'm doing. Might be a lot easier.
Yeah!
To put everything I did in this video together, I made an illustration with Scarlet Shade, aka Winifred, and Midas, aka Fox. My miraculous knockoffs that I did in this video, check it out if you want to. I did one with them in the dynamic style and one with the more stylistic cartoonist style. I've been in a terrible art block, but I'm obsessed with them. So I've mostly just been listening to music and thinking about story beats for them because I have no motivation at the moment, unfortunately. And when I have art block, my favorite thing to draw is something low-key freaky. And this is actually kind of high-key freaky. I like drawing intimacy in the most simplest of acts. I like to see how far I can push things. She's literally just kissing his hand, but oh my god, why is he reacting like that? Oh my god. I get more out of this than two characters kissing. You know what I mean? This section is more so you can just see this stuff in action. I'm sure a lot of you have left the video by this point, but for those of you who care about my OCs, I appreciate every single one of you. Never in my wildest dreams have I ever thought people would care about my characters, but the little story idea for this piece is Midas and Scarlet Shade are superheroes based off of fairy tales, and they are a team. And Midas is worried that he will somehow hurt Scarlet by accident since he has the golden touch. And she's trying to prove to him that no matter what, he won't hurt her. Even when he's in the most effed up state, he can still control his powers. He won't turn her into solid gold. And it's a miracle because that boy is very flustered. I have so many ideas for them. I just need to be possessed with motivation like I have been for the past year. Again, please give it back. Well, there's my entire process start to finish in a very small window. I didn't go over clothing. I didn't even really go over anatomy except the face. So if you're really interested, I will do more tutorial type videos though. I don't know. After this one, y'all might be like, no, I don't think so. And I don't blame you. But this was a little taste into how it usually goes for me. I encourage you to draw along if you like. I know a lot of people like to draw to videos. I do all the time. I hope you got something out of my ramblings. If nothing else, maybe you feel inspired now, and that's all I can ask for. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to try to upload more from now on. I've been on YouTube for almost 2 years and I still have not landed on a consistent schedule. But you all are so patient and extremely kind, and I appreciate you all so much for sticking around, and I can't thank you guys enough, and I feel like I don't say that enough, so genuinely thank you. Sorry for getting all sappy, but I had to say that. If you like this video, please share and subscribe, and comment below any art techniques you have to share with others. I will also be in the comments if you have any questions. I will gladly answer them. As always, peace.